people to join. I think we'll probably have some people trickling in. But hello, everybody that has already joined us. Like I said in the chat, we're going to get started here at 5:05. Okay. Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jenna Henry. I wear a lot of hats. The hat I am wearing today is both the secretary of the board of the Keystone Progress Education Fund. I am also here as the organizing director of the Penn Franchise Project. I will let my friends here introduce themselves. We'll start with Megan.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Megan French-Marslin. I also wear several hats, and today I am wearing the hat of representing the Coalition for Parole Justice here in Pennsylvania. Lee?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. My name is Lee Owens, and I serve as the executive director of the Penn Franchise Project, formerly the legislative director over at SCIU, Pennsylvania State Council.
Great. All right. So we're here today to talk a little bit about the intersection of democracy and criminal justice reform. These issues are very, very intertwined, actually, which can be surprising to a lot of people. It doesn't matter who you are voting for. You could be voting for your city council person, your state representative. Pennsylvania is a state that elects judges at every level. So from district magistrate all the way up to Supreme Court justices we elect in this state. You have your district attorney. Because of the way that the system works, 98% of cases are decided by plea bargain. That means that your district attorney, who is an elected official, pretty much has the final say in 98% of cases. And so that makes them the most powerful person in the criminal justice system. So whenever we vote for people who enact certain policies, we end up with a ballooned prison population, or what we call mass incarceration. Mass incarceration is a direct result of policy choices that were enacted by elected officials for whatever reason. We know that the crime bill in the 90s really spurred this big tough on crime movement that enacted a lot of bad policy that really just ballooned our prison population to a point where we now have millions of people in this country in jail. So now what we're starting to see is kind of the opposite of that, right? With particularly, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, we're starting to see district attorneys being elected who are more reform-minded and want to reduce our prison population and want to actually enact policies to address the issues that are causing crime, rather than enacting policies that simply punish crime. So just to get, what we're going to do now is kind of get into some different policy proposals that we've seen at different levels. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about some local level or municipal level proposals. Something we've heard a lot of people talking about recently is our mental health task force, right? We see instances, not just in Pennsylvania, all across the country, where we have armed police officers showing up to mental health calls where they don't need to be. We should be sending mental health professionals to those types of calls. This, I know there's a big push for this where I live in State College, Pennsylvania, because we had a mentally ill man, his parents called the police because they wanted their help because he was kind of making threats against his own life. The police showed up at the door. He answered with a knife. They shot him. That's the type of things that are happening. And so there's a big push for that task force. Like I said, what they actually ended up doing in State College instead, or at least, for now, is hiring a social worker to work with the police, which, sounds like a good idea in theory. However, that social worker works for the same system that the police do, which is a lot of times whenever a social worker is working for the police and they're working directly with the police, they just end up becoming a rubber stamp for the police. So I don't want to do all the talking here. I know, Lee, you had said you knew a little bit about the Allegheny County Jail, the solitary confinement ballot measure that was passed in Allegheny County, which is just a perfect example of democracy and criminal justice reform intersecting. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Before I do that, I just wanted to just note that there's also a growing push for the kinds of measures that you're referring to in State College as it relates to, getting out mental health professionals instead of police. There's a push like that happened in Philly after the Walter Wallace incident, which was a similar incident to what you mentioned. A gentleman that had a 911 call made on him because he was having a mental health breakdown. And when the police came, he came outside lunging at them with a butter knife. And he ended up being shot to death. So this was the same year as the George Floyd murder. And so since then, there's been a small but growing push to get more funds allocated to the mental health professionals. But as you stated, there's a thin line because a lot of the legislation that you might find will allocate that money toward the police departments, which we know is a mistake. Because the last thing we need is more money going into the police departments. We need it to be a separate entity. And so I just wanted to note that similar work is being done in Philly. But directly to your question about PA Stands Up and the push that's being made in Allegheny County, and I believe in Lackawanna County as well, to get us to the point where we're ending solitary confinement in those jails. I like to always bring it back to what the overarching theme is, because when you're trying to build power in marginalized communities, when you're trying to build power in communities that are impacted by the criminal justice system, the main way in which you have to do that is you have to begin to lift up the issues that matter to this constituency, right? And so we know that people that are affected by the criminal justice system have been incarcerated, have been on parole, have been on probation, many of which have spent time in solitary confinement and can tell you firsthand that it is a nightmare. And so when you add that lived experience to politics, to advocacy, to organizing, what you get is you get a lot of passion. But what you also get is you get results. You get people that want to go to the ballot box. You get people that want to knock on other people's doors and say, this is why I voted for Larry Krasner. You should do the same thing. This is why I'm voting at all. You really need to do the same thing because it does matter. It does. Your vote does matter. And when we see elections that are being lost by 50 votes, 100 votes here, a couple hundred votes there, it shows you that every single vote matters. And so the work to do is to get people to the ballot box, but you can't just be concerned about getting them to the ballot box. You have to be concerned about the issues that they are concerned about, and you have to know your constituency enough to know what those issues are. And the lived experience, people doing this work that had that lived experience are the best ones to carry that out.
Absolutely. I know in our prison gerrymandering work, the personal stories that we were able to, tell about what it's actually like to be incarcerated and be treated like you're just a number on a page for redistricting. It really, really made the biggest impact having those stories. And I think too, with it's just so powerful that to see that, in Allegheny County, what happened when they took an issue like solitary confinement and said, hey, we could vote on this. And the fact that, they were able to get enough people to actually pass that measure to vote on this, that's just so powerful. And it just shows you how many people are truly, truly affected by the criminal justice system. Um, so, did you want to talk a little bit about the voting in jail project that is going on right now?
Sure, absolutely. So there is a big push throughout the Commonwealth to get more people to vote, and one of the constituencies that we see, because as you know, as everyone already knows, voting rights are under attack like never before, and if certain members have their way, there will be a lot of disenfranchisement. And so one of the ways we're trying to counter that is to find constituencies that have been overlooked. And as a formerly incarcerated individual, I find it to be my duty to reach out to that constituency, the constituency that I am a part of, to say we need to be building power amongst ourselves, in order to get us to where we need to be, legislative wise, poverty wise, and again, obviously, the main goal is to get people to the ballot box, right, and to get these ballot measures passed and voted on the right way. But one of the constituencies that is super overlooked is individuals that are incarcerated in jail, because legally they are allowed to vote, but out of 30,000 people that are currently incarcerated in county jails, only 52 people applied for an absentee ballot during the 2020 election, which is just, it's ridiculous. And so we know that a lot of the reason for that is because the infrastructure that should be set up around voting in jail is just not there. 71% of counties, of our Commonwealth counties, don't have any procedures, any policies regarding voting in jail, or policies around visitation to allow outside agencies to assist with voting in jail. And so that is the reason why the turnout in jail is so low. Now, it's safe to say that, every year Republicans go on this big push to say, in Pennsylvania, to say that you can't vote if you have a felony. They do it every year. It's known that they do that. And people don't know that they can vote if they have a felony. So knowing that that's the case, it should be safe to say that people that are incarcerated a lot of times don't know that they can vote. People that are incarcerated in jail don't know that they can vote. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out the best practices. Well, we figured out the best practices. And based on the best practices, what we've done is we've been able to draft a bill on the state level. We're going to be working with the Legislative Black Caucus to get that bill introduced. And we're also working county by county on city ordinances to put the best policies and the policies in place that are based on best practices, right? And so also, organizing county by county, as Jenna was saying, on these ballot measures, what we're trying to do is, like, we'll send out, say for example, we'll send out a mailer to incarcerated people in jail so that they know that they can vote, but we'll also have information about the ballot measure to end solitary confinement, so they can vote the right way on the ballot measure. So knocking, kind of just knocking out two birds with one stone, so to speak. But I think the idea here is, if you're trying to build power, you have to find the most marginalized communities and speak to them all year round, not just when there's a candidate that you want to get elected. Last thing I'll say about it, because I think I'm rambling on, is that one of the people we've been working with is one of the council members, Councilwoman Holloman in Pittsburgh, whose basic premise was like, we desperately need people to be coming into the county jails to register people to vote, and not only registering them to vote, but coming in and explaining why voting is important. And we need them to do it all year round, not just when there's a candidate that we're trying to lift up. So if the council member is saying that, and we all are in agreement that we know that that's the case, that's just what we need to do. Now that we know that we need to do what we need to do, we just need to get out there and do it. And there's a lot of work that goes into it on the back end. But that's what we're working on in terms of making progress in those spaces. So
can I just tap in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I think that I think Lee is absolutely right. And to the sort of comments in the chat, there is a huge amount of misinformation spread by corrections officers, by probation officers, by parole officers. And I will tell you from work on Rikers Island, the majority of people in jail believe they can't vote. Even more than that, there is a mistrust of the civic system, right? Because it has landed people in jail or in prison for these untenable amounts of time. And so when folks get out, it's not that they can't vote, right? People with a felony conviction can vote in Pennsylvania, but that they won't. And what happens is sort of a ripple effect across communities, where we have communities where 50, 60, 70% of people aren't voting because they have a loved one who is formerly incarcerated and believes that the system isn't working for them. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely. And that's why these issues are so important to lift up, because it shows that we're not just about getting people to the ballot box, that we really do want to see systemic change. And, systemic change happens on the most micro levels possible, right? And so when you go into counties one by one and organize those counties around specific issues, then you build, like you said, Megan, you build that trust. And by building that trust, you get people to where we want them to be, where we need them to be, and where they really should be.
Yeah, well, and I think too, the point that you brought up about Bethany Hallam wanting to get people inside the jail to talk to the people there about registering. I think that's so important, because if we can get people interested while they're still incarcerated, they're much, much more likely to stay interested once they get out, and they're much more likely to maybe have something that they can like latch on to there. Like if somebody, whenever I was sitting in a county jail in 2012, if somebody would have come in and drawn the line for me from voting, to the district attorney, to the judges, to the magistrates, to the council people who are in charge of the police department, I would have registered. I would have been I would have started, but I didn't know I was allowed to vote for a long time. I didn't actually know that I was allowed to vote until 2015. Because I have a felony, and I just thought I wasn't allowed, because that's what I was told. I mean, even the assistance office tells people with felony convictions that they're not allowed to vote quite frequently. So yeah, I think that is huge, is like getting to people while they're still incarcerated is huge for sure.
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on here to our section about what state level things are being introduced and being talked about. So we have a few different things on the state level. We have SB 135, which is a bill to end life without parole in Pennsylvania. For those of you who do not know, Pennsylvania is one of only a few states in the entire country that has mandatory life without parole for murder one or murder two. Murder two could be something as simple as you're the lookout for a robbery and it went wrong and somebody got shot, and now you're in prison for the rest of your life because you stood on the corner and we're a lookout for somebody. Where there are, I think, thousands of people in Pennsylvania serving life without parole currently for murder to having never even pulled the trigger. And most states do not do this, right? Usually you have like maybe a 25 to life, right? Where or a life sentence, you can see the parole board after 20, 25 years. So this is important for a lot of reasons, and it kind of ties into the other bills here, which are SB 835, which is a geriatric parole bill, and HB 2347, which is medical parole, because we have a huge population of prisoners who are under geriatric care. We have a nursing home facility in the DOC because we are warehousing people. So not only is this inhumane, it's extremely expensive. And most of these people are rehabilitated and could come home safely and actually be an asset to the community. So Megan, I know you know quite a bit about these bills. What do you know like where they are in the process? What exactly is in these bills, and what can people do to support them?
Yeah, thank you. I'll start with SB 135, addressing life without parole. This bill was really forwarded by directly impacted advocates on the ground, mainly from the Philadelphia region, who were beginning to address this broader system that Jenna sort of described. It was introduced by Senator Street in 2021. And unfortunately, it has had very little movement. It hasn't gone to committee yet. And part of it is because the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission is so wedded to this idea of life without parole. The bill would create eligibility for people who had committed their crimes at the age of 15 or over after 35 years. And if you were under 15, which would make you a juvenile lifer without parole, it would be after 25 years for first degree and 15 years for second degree. I think what's interesting about the bill is it also has a reinvestment package. So if you think about the just extreme amounts of money we spend keeping people incarcerated for their entire lives, this money would be diverted to victim services that would be more holistic than what we've seen coming out of Pennsylvania more recently. Reentry programs that would give people a springboard to actually have a life when they're released, and also money for more holistic parole programs. So I think we're in a place where they're trying to figure out how to move the bill forward. The bill intersects with a 2012 Supreme Court decision called Miller versus Alabama, which was specifically about juvenile lifers without parole, that said this was unconstitutional and there had to be a moment where juvenile lifers could come before the parole board. Now, unfortunately, Pennsylvania decided to enact what is called Act 204. Act 204 reaffirms the fact that Pennsylvania can sentence people to juvenile life without parole, and also makes it not retroactive. So it can't be applied retroactively at any point. There have been a lot of legal scholars that have argued that this is actually unconstitutional. And the fact is that it's either going to move legislatively, but we will probably have to pick up a litigation strategy to really see movement on that bill. I'm going to switch to geriatric and medical parole. There are over 10,000 people who are considered elders, which is, I think, a very young age to be elder, but 55, who have served lengthy sentences. And when I say lengthy, that means over 20 years. We, in studies that talk about the desistance from crime, I'm avoiding using the word recidivism, but desistance from crime, we have found that people over 55 have a 0% recidivism rate. And so these two bills provide pathways for people with serious medical conditions, including terminal illness, and conditions where the DOC doesn't have the resources to take care of that person, as well as people who are over 55 who have served at least half of their sentence or done 25 years of their sentence. It also mandates that the DOC help people provide or help people prepare their parole applications. And I think this is really critical because most people are given very little support in preparing those applications, and this would do that. These are two bills that are being spearheaded by an organization called the Abolitionist Law Center, as well as a larger coalition of organizations. They are formerly incarcerated led organization. This speaks to Lee's point about the fact that we really need to be looking to the people that are most directly impacted by the policies and legislation that is being introduced in Pennsylvania if we are going to seek solutions that are actually holistic, that actually decarcerate, and that actually begin to move us towards a more just society. That bill right now was moved. It is also being sponsored by Senator Street, but has, or those two bills, it has a much greater amount of support and has moved to judiciary. So a bill moves from an introduction to a committee to the floor, and then will be taken to the House. And there are several lobby days that are coming up that are looking at those particular days, and I will try to find the dates for those in the interim. But that's sort of a scope of where those bills are. And also just a reiteration of why base building is so important, because right now we just don't have the electorate pushing legislators to move these bills in the way that they need to be moved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, a lot of criminal justice reform, a lot of this stuff gets written off as like a Philly thing, and so a lot of times whenever they only see groups that are from Philly and Pittsburgh pushing for something, they can just kind of write it off. So but I think that there really is more support for this out there, among the electorate, and we just need to. There's a lot of base building that needs to be done to just get those people who live out here in my direction in the middle of the state who also agree with this, and get those folks in front of their legislators, because right now they're just not hearing it from their constituents. But I think the support for it is there. We just really have to get out and explain it to people. Like, whenever I explained that Pennsylvania is one of the only states that it's automatically life without parole no matter what, people are always like, what? Yeah, like, I mean, that's insane, but they just don't necessarily realize that that's how it works. So switching gears just a little bit here. We've heard a lot about probation reform recently. There's been a lot in the news. We had the whole Meek Mill situation that really shed some light on how bad our probation system actually is here in Pennsylvania. You have people in where like in my case, years ago I was on probation for selling an eighth of marijuana. Ended up in jail for drinking alcohol, not for committing a new crime, just simply drinking alcohol, which was against the rules, but not a crime, right? What the one time I was even assaulted by somebody and thought the police might help me, but that they did not. I ended up in jail because I had been drinking, and it's a zero tolerance policy for a lot of probation officers, right? So there's just so many issues with probation, and for a minute it looked like we were going to get a real reform bill out of SB 913, and then something happened, and it was hit with the amendments, right? Correct me if I'm wrong on what happened in this process here, but basically the DA's Association got their hands on it, and some of the other groups that were bringing a lot of attention to this issue decided that they were just going to go along with the terrible bill, in order to call it a win, while the rest of us are now fighting to try and stop it. So I think, Megan, you are, or you might be the most familiar with this bill here. Do you want to explain to people a little bit what happened?
Sure. I feel like I'm living and breathing this bill almost every day right now. So as Jenna said, not last session, but the session before, there was a concerted effort to pass real reform. The bill was sponsored by Bartolotta. It felt like there was movement, and as Jenna said, several very conservative groups stepped in and blocked the bill. So the bill never actually made it to the House floor. The bill that is currently being introduced and has already passed the Senate is SB 913. And this bill is being, if you want to understand just how bad this bill is, you can just look at who's sponsoring the bill. It's being sponsored by the District Attorneys Association, the Commonwealth Foundation, and Americans for Prosperity, which is the Koch brothers network. It is also being sponsored by an organization called the Reform Alliance, that is directly connected to Meek Mill, but is pushing a bill that would not have benefited Meek Mill at all. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of the provisions. This is a 36-page bill, and for those of you who read state-level legislation, like it's generally like 8 pages. This is a deeply convoluted bill that is designed I think by design, is designed to make it very confusing to understand what's good and what's bad and how it will actually impact people. The reality is, the way I describe it, and for those of you who liked board games as a kids, maybe you'll get into this, is it is a bill of chutes and ladders. For every time you climb up and get something out of the bill, they are taking it right from under your feet, and you are back to square one. And I'll talk about a couple of the provisions of the bill, but I do want to just mention that there have been public defenders across the state have been really reticent to support this bill, even though they're in a funny position. And some defenders, including the Philly Defender's Office, have come out in extreme opposition. Now, why is that? That's because, one, it will not impact people in Philadelphia who are often subject to 4 or 5 technical violations, what Jenna talked about, ending up in lockup for a technical violation. That could be anything from crossing county lines to go to the hospital in an emergency. That could be a probation officer showing up at your house at 8 and your curfew was 7, missing a meeting to go to work. Yeah. There are all sorts of these things, and people rack up technical violations because they are designed that way to really screw people. Oh, fabulous. Screw people over. So this bill, even the people that support it have said that it will probably only impact 15% of people who are on probation. Now, there are 180,000 people on probation in Pennsylvania, and that is just outrageous. That means we are leaving hundreds of thousands of people behind with a bill that does very little. But let me talk about some of the most absurd provisions of the bill. First, if you are sent to jail on a probation detainer, right now, you can only be sent to jail by a judge. This would allow any law enforcement officer, including a cop who stops you on the street because you have a broken taillight, to issue a probation detainer and send you straight to jail. That to me should be something that is horrible. 2, it creates a provision for indefinite detention of people with mental health disorders or substance use disorders. Now, this goes back to what Jenna was talking about with mental health being treated by the cops, is because we don't have the community-based resources to treat people with mental illness or substance abuse disorders. And so instead, we are using lockup as a mechanism to do this. This makes it indefinite. So a judge can put you in jail, throw away the key, and you can spend the next 6 months in lockup because they don't have a bed for you in a mental health facility. That is incredibly outrageous. The third thing that it does, which is something that the Philly defenders have been very vocal about, is it creates conferences. So the only way to get off probation is to come to a probation conference that would happen 3 years, after 3 years for misdemeanor, and after 5 years for a felony, and would be the responsibility of the person on probation to file for that conference. This is really outrageous because one of the things that we found is that the majority of cases where public defenders file for early termination of probation, they get it. Overwhelmingly so, 85%. Now, this is something that we believe judges will look at and will be like, well, I don't want to be the judge that let the person off probation before their conference and then they committed a new crime. So we're just going to wait. So it is going to delay early termination for people all over the state. And these are some of the worst provisions of the bill. I'll say the other one that strikes me is if a weapon is used, and a weapon could be a water bottle in this case, if anything is used in a weapon-like way, you do not qualify ever. So this is a bill that is a game of smoke and mirrors to see something pass that won't actually benefit people. And the fact is that it's based on a bill, and then I'll shut up. It's based on a bill that comes from Virginia, that in the year since implementation, Virginia has seen a rise in probation rather than a decrease. And I think we need to be really careful, especially with these bills that are so convoluted, about how we're engaging with them and who we're seeing as credible messengers, because this is a bill that over 55 organizations have, from across the state, have said that they do not support. And those organizations are loud and strong. And I invite you to attend our lobby day on April 27th in Harrisburg. Just a quick plug. But yeah, that's my spiel.
Because I got to unmute myself. Yeah, this bill is as somebody who's experienced the probation system in Pennsylvania. I think the craziest thing to me about this bill was the admin probation. So if you can't afford to pay all your restitution, is it only for restitution or is it also for fines?
It's for restitution.
So specifically restitution, which could, be, given for pretty much any crime you could possibly be convicted of could have restitution attached to it. So if you can't afford to pay that, you have to stay on probation indefinitely until that is paid in full. I mean, and that to me is just, that's absolutely insane. Just once again, creating another way for the rich to buy their way out while poor people have to suffer the consequences of being on probation for the rest of their life. That even doing something as simple as a disorderly conduct charge could wind you in jail on a detainer because you're on probation for the rest of your life because you're poor.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Jenna, it's like the longer you're on probation, the longer you're paying fines and fees to the probation system for your supervision. You're paying for your supervision. So where people cannot pay their restitution, they also can't pay their fines and fees, which is another way where people end up locked up on a technical. And so it is a truly vicious cycle, and it is a bill that just makes my skin crawl.
Same. It's absolutely same. It's a shame to see so many people supporting this bill, right? I mean, and like you said, it's convoluted on purpose. They purposely made it so it's hard to understand. So unless you really understand the way the system works, or you've been through it, you've had a family member who's been through it, on the surface, it probably doesn't look so bad to, the senators who majority of voted yes on this bill. Like, they're probably like, oh, okay, because they're just looking at the surface of it and not really understanding how it's going to, affect things once it's implemented. So, I think it's really important to plug here, call your legislators, like, call your legislators, particularly in the House. Reach out to Leader McClinton. Make sure you're reaching out to the folks on the Judiciary Committee. I know Emily Kincaid is a good person to reach out to. She's a Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. Rob Kaufman is the chair of the Judiciary Committee. If there's anybody listening from Franklin County, or really anywhere, but particularly if you're outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, please reach out to your legislators and tell them to vote no on this bill, because those are the legislators who are really not hearing it the most. Whoever they are, reach out to them, but particularly if you live outside of the cities.
And I would just say the other really critical group to reach out to right now is members of the Black Caucus. We are trying to create a blanket opposition from the Black Caucus. One of the things that, and Lee and I have been working on a whip list all day, so this is very fresh in my mind, but one of the things that we have heard is that most of Black Caucus does not know about this bill. And so the ways that they're going to hear about it is either from the people who have supported this bill and who have pushed it through with tons of lobbying money, or they're going to hear about it from us. And whoever they hear about it from first is going to be the critical voice in either killing this bill altogether or seeing it move in ways that could be incredibly dangerous for all sorts of reform, criminal justice reform down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that lobby day is happening. Very excited to join you for that, because that's just going to be so important. So important, because people just don't know, and I think a lot of times what happens with these policies is you have a lot of very well-intentioned people who just don't know and don't have the direct experience or somebody around them with a direct experience to say, hey, wait a minute, like maybe that's not a good idea. Lobbying really does work. Just getting out and talking to people. I had a great experience at the lobby day for the Life Without Parole bill that we did, and talking to Republican legislators, conservative Republicans, about ending life without parole. And, actually they're a lot more receptive than you might think, because when you have the right messengers and you have a compelling story to tell, it moves people. And, at the end of the day, what moves people is their emotions, right? Like, people aren't going to necessarily remember what you said, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. So, that's why these lobby days are so incredibly important. So please join us, particularly if you've been impacted by the probation system. Know people have been impacted by the probation system. Please join and tell those stories.
And just one more thing is a big shout out to Katie Muth and Nick Saval, who opposed the bill in the Senate when pretty much no one was. The vote was almost unanimous around SB 913, and that was because grassroots organizations had not gotten involved in the political education process. And now that we have a whole lot more power to move that. But at that moment, both Katie Muth and Nick Saval both said, we're standing with the people on this one. And that was incredibly, incredibly important.
Yeah. All right. So we are coming up on the end of our session here. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody in the audience have any questions they want to throw out here? I hope that you all were able to learn something here. I hope that maybe we motivated you to come lobby with us, reach out to your legislators. No,
We are not supporting it. We're opposing it. But thank you for asking.
Thank you for joining, Jean. I would love to talk to you more about this bill sometime. I know you would probably be interested in this lobby day. Great to see you again. Well, kind of see you, I guess. So yeah, okay. So I believe our session here ends at 5:55, if I remember correctly. So that is it for us. Thank you so much for joining. Lee, do you have anything else? Any final words? Plug Penn franchise.
Yeah, I'm going to drop the
time.
website in the chat. Check out our website, www.pennfranchiseproject.org. Learn more about what we're doing. Jenna just started as our organizing director, so congratulations. We're so excited to have Jenna on staff here. So check us out, and we will be making a lot of noise this summer, so just stay tuned.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Yes. Thank you all for joining. And, I hope you're all sticking around to check out some of the other panels we have. I'm particularly excited for the Senate forum that's happening this evening. So, all right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.